Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. While we enter the second week of the government shutdown, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has made statements that he might consider firing air traffic controllers who call out sick in a form of protest to the government shutdown. Secretary Duffy and the administration are likely thinking back to the last government shutdown, where a shortage of air traffic controllers forced the FAA to limit traffic to several major airports such as LaGuardia and Newark. All it took was 10 air traffic controllers to stay home to basically cause a work stoppage that convinced the administration at the time to pass a temporary funding and end what had been an over-month-long government shutdown. When asked about back pay during this current government shutdown, Secretary Duffy said, quote, "If we have some of our staff that aren't dedicated, we're going to let them go. We can't have people not showing up for work." And he isn't wrong. Across the U.S., the FAA has a shortage of about 3,000 air traffic controllers. This shortage actually has roots all the way back to the Reagan administration, when in 1981, President Reagan fired 11,000 air traffic controllers and banned them from ever being able to work for the FAA after negotiations over pay and conditions fell through between the FAA and the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization following a strike by those air traffic controllers. Air traffic control is a very specialized job and requires a lot of technical knowledge. Adding on to that, there's a mandatory retirement age of 56. As a result, recovering from that mass purging reportedly took nearly a decade. And because air traffic needs have only expanded exponentially in the last 4 decades, and the amount of special technical needs and skills has only increased as well, the pool of qualified controllers has not grown to compensate. That's on top of a recent hiring freeze President Trump enacted on air traffic controllers following the mid-air collision between a passenger jet and a Black Hawk helicopter back in late January. So I'd say now is definitely not the time to be firing the small amount of qualified established people at what is an incredibly high-stress job that they do have. Secretary Duffy says that while it's a small fraction of people who don't come to work that can create this massive disruption, and that's what we're seeing rippling through our skies today, most air traffic controllers are, quote, amazing, beautiful, wonderful American patriots that show up to work every day, which of course paints those that are not showing up as non-patriots. Considering just how badly they need air traffic controllers and how just a handful of them not showing up could grind air traffic practically to a halt, as it did back in 2019, I can certainly see why the administration might not want to see that repeated. Despite their constant messaging that the, quote, radical left are responsible for this current government shutdown, Republicans are not winning in the messaging department, and many do blame them for this shutdown. Democrats in Congress are standing firm on their demands to not let Affordable Care Act subsidies expire and to roll back Medicaid cuts. And their lack of desire to back down or compromise on that is likely what will win out in the end. Honestly, this threat to fire non-compliant air traffic controllers feels like desperation. They don't want this to end their government shutdown because they're desperate to not lose. But Republicans are going to lose this shutdown just like they lost the last one. The Republicans messaging that the Democrats shut down the government because they want to give illegals health care isn't convincing anyone except for the hardest core of their supporters. And many correctly see the Republicans as the ones who are truly to blame for the shutdown. So when it comes to messaging, the Republicans are already losing. So if air traffic controllers were the key to ending this shutdown, they would come out the losers. The answer to a massively understaffed and overworked air traffic controller pool is not to fire the ones that are still employed. In any other context, if somewhere was suffering from staffing shortages, their solution would not be to fire the staff that they already have. And also we have to remember that on top of being an incredibly grueling, stressful, exhausting job, all of these air traffic controllers controllers are currently working without pay because the government is shut down and they are not getting paid. So Secretary Duffy and the administration can call them patriots and great Americans and whatever they want, but if they don't get paid for the job that they're doing, why should they come in and do the job at all? They can't pay for groceries or their rent or for childcare or transportation with patriotism and love for their country and commitment to their job. They need money, and it's going to get to a point where it's not going to be worth working if they're not able to live. Things have not yet gotten quite to 2019 levels of disruption. So far, the delays caused by the lack of air traffic controllers have been relegated to evening flights and have not yet hit the major East Coast airports. Part of what made the 2019 sick call so effective was they were affecting major transit hubs and basically crippling air traffic through those airports. But threatening to fire the insubordinate air traffic controllers may not be the only card Republicans have to play. Some are saying, though no one in official channels, that the administration may very well go through with these firings and then replace, if maybe only temporarily, with military air traffic controllers. It's hard to know how plausible this actually would be, but I think it stands to reason that if they did try it, it may not work very well long term, since military controllers don't have the experience and technical knowledge that commercial air traffic controllers do, and how capable they would be in handling the sheer volume of passenger and cargo air traffic is hard to know. A spokesperson for the National Air Traffic Controllers Association Union has said that there's already processes and procedures in place to deal with the inappropriate use of sick leave. So at least on paper, they seem poised to get rid of those who they believe to be trying to use their sick leave as a form of protest, as they did in 2019 during that shutdown. Another thing I've seen brought up that I feel is maybe just as infeasible is another air traffic controller strike similar to the one during the Reagan era. Considering how incredibly understaffed they are right now, due in part to that original strike and the resulting mass firing, it seems unlikely history could repeat itself in the same way and our current president fire all the traffic controllers the way our previous one did. If he tried to pull that, air traffic would most definitely grind to a halt, and there would be no way to blame the radical left for that. Air traffic controllers, or I suppose the lack of air traffic controllers, were the key to ending the 2019 government shutdown, and I think the administration is aware of that and are very keen to not allow them to be so again. But the longer this shutdown stretches and the more desperate people are getting without pay, the more likely I think that this shutdown is going to end when some vital industry, probably air traffic controls, force the administration's hand and make it end. Making these people work for weeks and weeks without pay is not good optics, and it's going to get to a point where something is going to give. And when you get down to it, what Democrats in Congress were asking for was not unreasonable. The issue, I guess, is that the Republicans don't want to roll back those cuts. It's basically like asking money back, and they've already spent it. They've already used those cuts to fund tax cuts for the wealthy, and it would undermine their big, beautiful bill, which they cannot do. It's why Republicans keep pushing the narrative over and over. The radical left and the Democrats are why the government shut down, because the reality that they are basically holding everyone's health care hostage for tax cuts for the wealthy isn't really defensible when you look at it from that perspective. People in red states are overwhelmingly the ones who are receiving Affordable Care Act subsidies and using Medicaid, so not extending the ACA subsidies and keeping those Medicaid cuts are disproportionately hurting them. So the administration needs to convince them that it's the Democrats that are hurting them, so they don't realize that it's the Republicans in Congress who are actually the ones who are about to make their medical costs rise exponentially. A lot of these Republican voters may not even realize that one of the only reasons they can even afford health care is because of the Affordable Care Act subsidies and Medicaid. So in a lot of ways, congressional Democrats are fighting for them just as much as they're fighting for their own people. But if you tell them their elected officials are fighting against them, they won't listen, which is unbelievably frustrating, but I guess it's just normal for these people. This shutdown, like every government shutdown, is largely a standoff between the two sides to see who will break first. But as painful as it is for everyone, federal workers and even the average person, I think if congressional Democrats hold the line and don't back down, they are going to come out on top when this shutdown inevitably ends. Despite all their bluster, Republicans don't hold the winning cards. And threatening to fire some of the very few people who are qualified to do the air traffic controller job simply is not one of them. They can't just put out help wanted signs for air traffic controllers, and they know it. We already have thousands fewer air traffic controllers than we need to have. They simply cannot afford to have even less. So these threats by the Transportation Secretary feel like empty threats. And if they actually went through with it, they would only make the situation worse. So when it gets down to it, I think Republicans are going to be the one who blink first. But how much longer we can wait for them to blink and what it's going to cost in waiting remains to be seen. All right, that's going to be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off another slice of news.